Hey crafty friends, this is Chelsea. In today's video, I want to use this beautiful stamp of the month from Close to My Heart for August. And this image I just thought was really pretty, and there's some really nice sentiments in here. And of course, my first idea is to stamp it out on some watercolor paper and start coloring it, whether that's like watercolors, distress inks. But then I thought, I know some of you guys don't like coloring. So how can we add color to these images, but maybe make it quicker and easier for my friends that don't like to color? And so I thought, why don't we try using pattern paper as our backgrounds instead of starting with white cardstock or watercolor paper? So I've pulled out some of the memory lane papers. I've also pulled out some of the April to June mix-ins from Close to My Heart. These have more of a vintage feel to them. So we are going to play around and experiment with using this as our backgrounds. Let's see how this turns out.
For our first card, I am starting off with this pretty wood grain paper. It kind of has this distressed, kind of like there's white paint on top of wood grain. I really love this pattern paper. I cut it down to about 3¼ by 4¼ I need it to fit behind this window. So this piece of paper is from the Memory Lane collection, which is a current special that goes until the end of August. And I use this curved rectangle frame thin cut to cut it out. And basically the scene is going to just show through that middle window there. So my piece has to be big enough to go behind there. Then I stamped the sentiment in black on a white circle that I cut with a stitch circle die. And I am using my Archival ink for this. Unfortunately, my pad does need to be re-inked, and I didn't realize that while I was stamping, so I did have to stamp it a couple of times to get it dark enough. But that's the bonus of using a stamping platform of some sort, is then you can keep re-inking until you get your perfect image. Now let's talk about the stamp of the month for a second. In my last video where I used the July stamp of the month, I had a couple questions about it. So how it works is Close to My Heart features a new stamp set every month. You can only buy it during that month, and you can either buy it full price, you can get it at a discounted price with a $60 order, or you can get it free with a $60 order if you're a VIP. I will have all of this along with all the supplies linked down in the description box below. So below the video, there's a little line that says show more. Click on that and it will drop down and show you everything down there. Now, as you can see, this card is just flying together very quickly, very simply. You could add inking to the background on that wood grain paper if you wanted to, but I wanted to keep this a little bit cleaner to match that pattern paper on the frame. And I did pop dot that frame with some thin foam tape. I didn't want a lot of dimension, but I wanted a little bit. So the leaves I'm using here are cut with the Sprigs and Leaves die. You're probably going to see this for a very long time from me because I love this die and I love all the leaves that it cuts out. And because it's a slimline size, you get all these great cuts all at once, plus you get the background that you can use on another project. So I'm just adding some sage ink onto these die cut leaves. They are cut from sage cardstock, so it's just a nice tone on tone look. And I was having a little bit of a challenge holding these still while I was inking them, so I put a little bit of my tape runner down on my all-purpose mat. It has a slick surface, so that tape will just roll right off of there. And then I just pressed my die cuts into that little bit of tape and it worked perfectly. So there's definitely other ways you can do this, and there's sticky mats and things like that on the market, but a little bit of tape runner worked great. I like how these leaves are adding that little extra bit of texture and dimension to this card. To me, it was a little too flat without something on there that added some texture. I also decided I needed some sparkle because nothing else on here has sparkle, so I grabbed my favorite. This is the sparkle color in the Sheer Shimmer Spritz. I love this stuff. It gives you the softest, most gorgeous like shimmer, kind of like an even shimmer over your whole project. You can kind of see it there. It's just pretty subtle, but in person you definitely see it, and it's enough to make a difference without kind of overpowering it and turning it metallic. I went ahead and glued everything down off camera. The Thinking of You circle has a little bit of foam tape on the part that overhangs the window so that it lays flat and doesn't sag. And I love how this turned out. I didn't do any coloring on that scene, but it still looks really pretty. Now, as we get going to jump into the second card, I just want to mention this is a collaboration with my friend Julie. I will have her video linked down below and at the end of this video, so make sure after you watch this video to go on over and check out her video. She's using the exact same stamp set as me. So I have another piece of paper from that memory lane collection, and I was debating which side to use. They were both so pretty, but I did decide to go with this stripe side, and I'm using the stitched rectangle thin cuts. This is long retired, but any kind of stitch die you have would work. It cuts the panel down to 3 3/4 by 5 inches. And now I'm debating on where I want my scene to stamp, if I want it right at the bottom or kind of move it up a little bit. I did decide to go up a little ways, and I'm going to stamp it just right centered on that panel. Now the trick about putting it centered on this panel is the stamp does come over the edge just slightly. So that means I cannot put this right up to the edges in my stamping platform. So I lined up the top, and then I'm just going to magnet this into place and stamp it with the same Archival black ink. So now you can see I have my scene there, but it looks a little bit odd because it's floating sort of in the middle of nowhere, right? That little river just kind of ends. So I grab my black Le Pen. I love these pens. They have like the perfect size end, and I'm going to use it to finish drawing this river in. So I'm following the line of where that edge was heading when the stamp cut off. And I put in those light lines first, and then I'm just scratching in some grass. I'm trying to match the same kind of texture, the same look of how the original stamp was drawn. It was actually really easy because it didn't have to be perfect, and actually I had to go back and add some imperfections so that it didn't look too fake, that looked like it was part of the stamp. So I'm basically just looking at the other parts of the grass and trying to match it. And then same thing for the water, kind of showing that water movement on the little stream or river. And it's hard to try and make things look uneven on purpose, but that's what I'm trying to do. Different size strokes, different thicknesses, kind of have them staggered. Basically looking at the lines that were there and trying to match the same style. Now, I'm definitely no sketch artist, and this isn't something I do a lot, but I think it's a great way to extend your stamps, especially if they're drawn in this already like very kind of sketchy design or style. I find it easier than things that are maybe more cartoonish or more smooth lines. And it's just something to keep in the back of your mind that if something's not working perfectly for you, grab a black pen and see if you can alter it to fit your card. Now, I know the stripes are not very realistic, and this is kind of a realistic scene, but I liked the idea of having a little bit of an ombre. I did kind of stick to having the green grass below, and I am going to add some clouds to the sky around my sentiment. And I think it works in the end. So it's just something a little bit different, something maybe a little bit more modern. Usually my first step would be to grab my watercolors, grab my pencils, grab my alcohol markers, right? So I wanted to try something different and see if I could find ways that I still really like the cards that I made, but do something a little bit faster and a little bit less skill intensive, and that maybe is more accessible to more people because you don't have to have hours of practice coloring. So I like how this is coming together. Of course, I wanted to add a little bit of sparkle to it. So I'm going to grab my same sparkle shimmer spritz here, give it a good little coat of that. And of course, this whole video, I'm like, oh, the spray is starting to run out. I was starting to get like little blobs and stuff. So that was a little bit of a struggle. The fuller the bottle is, the better it sprays. But I'm starting to get down, so I know it's time to reorder. I'm just using a really thin line of this Tombow glue here to add this to my card base. I like to use the Close to My Heart card bases. They come with envelopes, and then I don't have to think about it. They're already scored. I just fold them in half and start building my card on top, and they come in a big pack. Now I am going to add some foam tape. I'm using my big roll. I love these huge rolls of foam tape because you don't run out every 2 seconds and it lasts for quite a long time. I do wish I would have backed the pattern paper with some cardstock, and I did that on the next card because the pattern paper just isn't as thick as cardstock, and it was a little hard to get this on the card nice and smooth. I really had to press it down. But I love how this foam tape is quite thin. It gives you just enough dimension. And if I can find it on Amazon again, I will link it below for you because it's nice to have that kind of unending roll of foam tape on hand. So I'm just lining it up right in the middle. This is a pretty straightforward card, nothing too crazy. I like how flat it is. It will mail beautifully. And hopefully you can catch that shimmer in person. Just has this really pretty kind of golden shimmer over the whole image. And that just adds a little extra something. Fortunately, it doesn't show the best on camera. For our third card, I went ahead and stamped this same with the Archival ink, except I stamped it right at the bottom of this panel. I cut that panel with the stitched rectangle again, and this is from a pattern piece of paper from the April to June mix-ins, and it basically has like floral images on it with a bunch of text on it, and I cut it so that the little bit of floral that was showing is kind of under the water and it's kind of hidden. So mostly you just see the text in the background. You could even stamp this on book paper or anything like that. Then I took a piece of masking paper. This is the Close to My Heart 4-inch roll of masking paper. And I'm just cutting the top part off. And I'm cutting right through the trees and right through the railings on the bridge because those are kind of see-through areas and I wanted there to be color behind them. It would look kind of weird if I cut around like the outside of the trees. You'd have this weird white spot. So the trick with the mask is to cut right on that black line and then take your time and really line it up properly. If you're enjoying this video so far, I hope you'll give it a thumbs up. It really helps out my channel and helps out my videos, and I appreciate you taking the time to do that. So we are going to be ink blending a background on here. I am using the Close to My Heart inks. This one is Honey Butter. It's a warm yellow. So when I say no coloring, for this video, I'm really meaning no watercolors, no pencils, no markers, right? That traditional kind of blending and layering of colors with some kind of pencil or pen. I find ink blending to be something pretty easy that a lot of people have success with, and it's so much faster, right? Than trying to layer up pencils or markers and get all that blending right. These inking brushes work really well with all sorts of ink, especially dye ink. And I'm kind of blending in an arch. So I have my kind of oval of yellow in the middle, and then I'm just kind of blending all around that in sort of a curved pattern. And I'm going from the honey butter into the melon, and then I went back to the honey butter to kind of create an orange color in between of them. Melon is a little bit orange, but more on the coral side. And then I felt like I needed a little bit more punch of color. So I grabbed Papaya, which is basically a darker version of Melon. And then I went ahead and added that right around the outside edge. I was trying hard not to bring it in too far because I didn't want it to get too dark. It's kind of hard when you have the bottom masked off. You don't really know how light or dark it's really going to look until you peel off that mask and you see the magic. But I went back and forth between the colors until I was happy with the blend. And I think that's the trick. You just got to keep layering until you're happy. And look at the reveal. You peel off that mask. It looks really cool. You could actually leave it like that if you wanted to, right? You could leave that bottom part white. And I debated it for a minute or two and then decided, no, I'm going to use the other part of the mask that I had cut and mask off the top. Now you could really get into the masking and like mask off the bench and mask off the bridge and the water. It'd be really easy to cut out the mask for the water and do it that way. But I decided not to. I grabbed a retired color. This is Belle from Close to My Heart. It was a color of the year a couple of years ago, I think. And I'm just adding it onto the water. I'm not trying to get it perfect. I'm leaving some areas lighter. And I'm basically just trying to get some blue on there without trying to get like a perfect transfer of color. Now I really do recommend some smaller blending brushes. So you saw the ones I was just using, and now I have grabbed an even smaller one. This is quite small. I'm using it with Toffee ink to add some color to the bench and also to the bridge. And if you prefer to do this sort of coloring where you're just kind of blending in a little bit of coloring, it's really nice to have different sizes of brushes. Now, I don't have a different brush for every color. Typically, I have like one for greens, one for reds, one for yellows, and then I just swirl it out on some scrap paper and make sure I don't have a lot of ink left in it before I switch colors, especially if I'm going from like a darker green to a lighter green. But that seems to work most of the time. I did need to switch to a smaller brush here for the green to really get in beside that bench and the water. I like those kind of mid-size brushes for backgrounds, but when you're trying to do any kind of detail work, they do get a little bit cumbersome and hard to get into those smaller areas. I will link the different brushes that I'm using down below if you want to check them out. I'm going in with the Sage ink. I just added a little bit more to deepen it up around those edges. And then I tried to get in next to the bridge, and I kind of ended up making a little bit of a whoops here. I kind of got blue and green a little over where I wanted it to get, but I think it's fine in the end. It's kind of off in the distance. You can't really tell what's going on back there. Anyways, it's a shadow. I don't know. At this point, I'm like, I am not starting over. No way. So of course I grab my favorite shimmer spray and I am going to start spraying this one. By this point I was getting some little puddles happening there. It was really spitting at me. So I did end up with a little lighter areas. I'm going to try and cover that afterwards with a little cloud because it did look kind of weird. It was kind of bleached out the color a little bit. It looked whiter there than the rest of the sky. So I went ahead and stamped my sentiment. This is still from that same Stamp of the Month set, the Goodbye Isn't Forever. And then I'm going to grab the clouds and the Melon ink again. I did stamp them full strength and then do a second generation, but you really can't see that lighter version. Here I tried to do the lighter version on the yellow because I thought full strength might be too much, but it actually was not dark enough to show. So I ended up going back and stamping at full strength. And I just wanted to add a little bit of detail to the sky, plus hide that one little splotch of the shimmer spray that kind of lightened the ink up there. And I think it worked out good. So I decided to keep this simple. I just mounted this with foam tape onto my white card base and left that nice thick white edge, which I think looks really nice, crisp, and clean. Now my intention for this video was to make 3 cards. That's usually what Julie and I do. We make 3 cards, but I just couldn't stop myself. I made a couple more, and I will be releasing the kind of process of this as a short. So I have a couple different cards here, and you'll see that come up on my channel as a short or over on Instagram as a reel. But I love how this turned out. The background is that kind of teal or turquoisey paper from the mixing collection, and that made a great background. And then this one is that green script paper from the mix-in paper as well, and I did gold embossing and then some ink blending over top, just a single color. And in person, I don't know if it comes off on camera, but in person it is actually pretty stunning. So watch for those coming on my channel very soon as shorts. And then here is a look at all the different cards that we did using the same stamp. None of them are traditional coloring, markers, pencils, watercolor paints, and they all turned out so differently. So I hope you'll look through your collection of paper, because I know you have a lot, and pick out some patterns that you can stamp on top of and make some pretty scenes. Make sure you check out Julie's video using this stamp set, and here also is my card playlist so you can watch some more tutorials. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.